Well, welcome back. We are now at Department 1, Office of Management and Budget, items which require board approval. Ms. Manning.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The first item on the agenda is a permission to apply for an community development block grant from the Department of Economic Opportunity. The amount is for $811,368, and they're anticipating that they can have an infrastructure master plan for the Stewart Business Park, and in hopes to mitigate the risk to the protected community.
Could you explain this some more? Where is it? Is it privately owned?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Assistant County Administrator George Stokas. To answer your question, Commissioner, this is more of the Commerce Business Park. I was surprised to know it's actually called the Stewart Business Park. We're looking at this project being from Monroe Street south to, I can never pronounce the park's name, Wojciech? Wojciech, that one.
Yeah.
That park, and from US 1 to Dixie. And part of this is to look at the stormwater, look at the roads, look at undergrounding the utilities as identified by the marine transportation route, but they will not cover that construction, but what would need to be there. It also looks at connecting the businesses that are currently on septic to sewer.
Excellent idea. Thank you.
The next is permission to apply for the Economic Opportunity funding. This is also for a plan to help to mitigate the Hope Sound community in the Hope Sound community redevelopment area. And I think it's similar to what George just spoke about, and I don't know if you want additional information.
I have that. This is something I've been working on since day one, trying to bring at least potable water into the Petway community, which is an underserved community. The groundwater there is horrendous. We have all kinds of situations with the health department with polluted wells. So this is something that community needs desperately.
Mm-hmm. If awarded, it'll be approximately $6.8 million, and it does not require a match.
Okay.
The third item is permission to accept the Federal Transit Administration grant in the amount of $119,300. This is to purchase an ADA accessible bus for the MARTI system, public transit system. The final item is permission to terminate the RPZ Runway Protection Zone grant. And the reason for that is they utilize the funds from the housing, they utilize the proceeds received from the HAP houses. We will return $23,756 back to the Airport Enterprise Fund and cancel the grant. And that's it.
Move approval.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hurd, seconded by Commissioner Campy. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
And I want to thank George, too. I left him out. He's been helping me with that Petway thing.
George has been a busy man.
He is. Department 2, contracts that meet threshold for board approval. Ms. Christy Brotherton.
Good afternoon, Christy Brotherton, Purchasing Manager. The first contract for consideration is water and wastewater treatment plant construction, which is a continuing services contract for general construction services for water and wastewater treatment facilities, which will be used on an as-needed basis. The contract term is a maximum of 5 years with a maximum not to exceed value of $5 million. Staff is recommending award to Florida Design Drilling Corporation, Hinterland Group, Lawrence Lee Construction Services, and TLC Diversified. The next contract we have is On-Road Transit and Support Services. This is the MARTI bus system operation. It's important to note that this contract will not begin until October 1st, 2020. However, we are switching to a new vendor, and approval at this time will allow for the new contractor to secure a new local vehicle maintenance facility and office space, as well as implement driver training, dispatcher training, and vehicle maintenance and utility service. This is a 5-year not-to-exceed term contract, and the contract value right now is $2,915,390. This is for the first year funding only. The funding is received through state and federal agencies on an annual basis, so we will bring back on a yearly basis a contract amendment to increase the funding. And staff recommendation is to award the contract to MTM Transit. That's it.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hurd, seconded by Commissioner, Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motions carry unanimously. Now moving on to Department 4, Revolving Loan Fund Grant Application to the Economic Development Administration from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Mr. Stokas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. As you know, previously we've met with each commissioner individually and have discussed this item, but to be brief but hopefully brilliant, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is requesting that the county contribute toward the creation of a revolving loan fund. This fund allows and assists small and medium-sized businesses in the recovery of economic damage caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The total, the revolving loan fund, also known as an RLF, the total value being asked or sought for is $1 million with an ask from the county of $52,000, which is representative of our 20% share based on population. St. Lucie County is giving approximately, I believe, $100,000, and Indian River is another $52,000. The money would be asked to come out of the Economic Trust Fund. Mr. Tom Lanahan with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is also here to offer any answers to any questions or comments that you may have at this time.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Lanahan?
Sure.
We're not going to force you into saying anything if you don't want.
Thank you, George. No, I am here to answer any questions that you have. I think an important point on this is this is an opportunity to get a 80% match for your money, and also create a revolving loan fund for the 3 northern counties of our region. So it's Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. Palm Beach County in our region already has access to one, and it's something that has been talked about over the years. And I think in conjunction with this coronavirus response, this is a good opportunity to try and set one up. It's a grant application, so with your match commitment, and then we can make the application, and if we're successful, we'll come back, work up an interlocal with everybody, and set out the parameters of how we're going to operate it in detail. But we're at the getting ready to apply stage at this point.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd, seconded by Commissioner Heatherton. All in favor?
Aye.
Wait. Ted wanted to talk. He just walked in the room. You don't
It's
care?
about to get a thumbs
You're
up,
good.
so yeah. Okay, don't stop.
We did the right thing. Okay.
Wait my time.
Wow, that's unusual for you.
Okay, that was a unanimous vote on that one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Department 5, request for approval, voluntary early separation incentive program. Mr. Matthew Graham.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Matt Graham, HR Director for the record. I'm here today for your consideration of a voluntary early separation incentive program, also known as VSIP. This program would allow employees with 6 years of service with Martin County to enter into a contract with the county to voluntarily separate and receive the following benefits. So you get 2 weeks of pay for each year of service for a maximum of 20 weeks, and 20 weeks of health and dental insurance paid for by the county. Program participants would be required to pay their employee portion of the premium. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions. I'm
Well,
available.
I'll elaborate a little bit. We did this before, some of the commissioners may remember back in 2009, I believe, and we actually did it like 3 years in a row. And the intent here is to not necessarily eliminate these positions, but being able to have more senior staff leave or retire, and then fill those positions with an entry-level individual that would be at a much less salary. So we just thought it would be prudent, given our uncertain times, and we will fill those positions on a case-by-case basis. But the intent is that they would be out as of October 1st, correct, Matt?
October 2nd.
October 2nd.
When we did this in the past, 2008, just so you know, there was 36 participants. In 2009, there was 29 participants, and then 2010, there was 14 participants.
So it was 08 we started it.
Good. Any questions?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Campy, seconded by Commissioner Hurd. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
We are moving right along. That is Chloe standing over there, right?
Yes.
Okay. Department 6, 2020 Legislative Session Final Report. Miss Chloe. I don't even try.
Hi. Donna, how do I get it?
You can close.
I just want to go to like the
Who's she looking for?
usually it's like in my document. Oh, there we go. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Down there.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chloe Siuperger, your legislative coordinator, and today I'm going to be presenting the 2020 State Legislative Session Final Report for you all. So on June 30th, the governor finally signed the Florida state budget, and he vetoed approximately $1 billion worth of veto line items. This was in anticipation of the revenue loss that the state would endure for the year due to the coronavirus. Now, despite the vetoes, Martin County was able to accomplish many of our state legislative priorities. So normally I wear my buff or gaiter that has the Martin County symbol on it, but to celebrate some of our wins, I wore my water mask because despite all the negative things happening in 2020, we did pretty well, especially on the environmental front. So first I'd like to start with the environmental resources budget. So specifically, we got $100,000 for Martin County Savannah South Water Control Weir. A big thank you to our legislative delegation for this one, so Senator Gail Harrell, Representative Marilyn Magar, and Representative Toby Oberdorf. So this was a member project which comes from a very, very small pool of money, and so we were able to allocate $100,000 for one specific project. The next item that's really awesome is the water quality cost share, which is $25 million. Now this line item is Indian River Lagoon specific, so what that means is $25 million will be allocated for Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, and Brevard County for water quality projects, including septic to sewer conversion. So I know our ecosystems and utilities department, we've all met, we've prioritized our projects that are ready to go, shovel ready, and DEP just opened up their grant link, so we've already submitted a couple projects, and I have a very strong feeling that we're going to be able to partner with the state on a lot of our different water quality priorities this year through that specific line item. The next one is the Blue-Green Algae Task Force line item at $10.8 million. Now this is for innovative technology as it relates to blue-green algae, and I know our ecosystems department and utilities are already working on phosphorus reduction projects that we will be granted hopefully funding for as well. So there's some really exciting projects on the horizon through Martin County. The The next is Everglades restoration. The state normally steps up, but they really stepped it up this year on Everglades restoration funding. So they have over $360 million total gone specifically to Everglades restoration, and that includes water quality restoration strategies at over $30 million. SERP got over $230 million, and then I broke down some of the specific projects it would go to, including IRL South. So the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project got over $50 million, dispersed water storage $5 million, and then the Northern Everglades got over $47 million. Next, we'll move on to policy. So policy is interesting, and I want to share a couple statistics with you all to get a general idea of how the session goes. So this session alone, there were 1,699 general bills. That's not appropriations bills, that's not resolutions, just general policy changes, so changes that change the law. Of those almost 1,700 bills, only 191 passed both chambers and headed to the governor. What that means is there's a lot of bills that drop off. So I know right before session starts during committee weeks, everyone gets excited because bills are being filed left and right, but in reality, only a few make it. However, many bills pop up as amendments to bills called vehicles, and they get tacked on, and the whole process just evolves, and that's what the session is for 60 days. One example of a vehicle bill that ended up being vetoed was Senate Bill 410, Growth Management. This was one big bill that got a bunch of different amendments relating to growth management, a lot of them interfering with home rule, preempting local government. This bill happened to be vetoed, and specifically this bill would have prohibited counties from adopting a comprehensive plan, a land development regulation, or another form of restriction unless certain conditions were met. The bill also required local governments to include a property rights element in their comprehensive plans. So a big thank you to not only Florida Association of Counties, but a lot of my counterparts, because I know this was a priority for the veto process. I also think this is a strong indicator on the governor's sentiment to protecting a lot of home rule, because most of the bills he's vetoed thus far in his career have interfered with local rule. So here are some bills that passed. Another huge vehicle bill is the Environmental Resources Management Bill. This was known as the Clean Waterways Act. So some background is it took the legislature 3 years to try and pass a comprehensive water quality package. And the reason it took so long is because a lot of the environmental bills get tacked on, and it's very difficult for everybody to agree. And so it ends up being too convoluted and corrupted in the end, so they end up not going with any kind of policy measure as it relates to clean water. So this act includes an update on stormwater design and operations regulations. It creates a wastewater grant program that establishes projects to convert septic systems. And so that requires a 50% local match, which is perfect for us. It includes rules for biosolids management. It requires DEP to deal with sanitary sewer overflow reporting. And then this one's a tricky one, and I know that the commission had interest in this bill especially, was it prohibits local governments from recognizing or granting any legal right to a plant, animal, body of water, or any part of the natural environment. And so this is known as the Rights of Nature movement, which is taking hold in the state as well as over the nation. And for example, what this would prohibit is the Indian River Lagoon from having any kind of natural legal rights. So I know for a fact that this is currently being challenged in the state, and so I'm going to follow this and stay tuned, because this was a really interesting provision that I was surprised got tacked on to the Waterways Act. Another thing is I know a couple organizations have critiqued this for being a little lax and not as strong as anticipated. I'm an optimist, and I say this is the first year the legislature prioritized a policy regarding clean water, and I think this is the first of many. So it's a first step, and I think we can continue to work towards better policy for the state. Another couple bills were bills relating to impact fees, Florida Tourism and Marketing. So that relates to Visit Florida. And so what that does is Visit Florida actually ended up being funded additionally. Last year, the funding got cut from $75 million to $50 million. This year they were funded at $50 million to continue their operation. And a lot of people predicted that Visit Florida was going to be eradicated. However, with some good foresight, especially seeing as our largest industry in the state has taken the brunt of the economic downfall, due to coronavirus, they kept Visit Florida going, which is awesome. There was another bill related to public construction works, and that has to do with bidding for local governments on contracts. There is another bill, tobacco and nicotine products, and that raises the smoking age to 21. And then there was a big tax package. Originally, this was a very concerning package because it cut a lot of our revenue. And then the Senate ended up paring it down significantly, and once again, good foresight on behalf of the legislature. And also a big kudos to Florida Association of Counties, because I know they worked very hard on making sure that this tax package wasn't going to hinder us too much. I'd like to move into COVID-19 and the impact and projection for the upcoming fiscal year. So actually yesterday, the Florida Office of Economic and Demographic Research released its June monthly report, which shows that the fiscal year 19 to 20 finished with a $1.9 billion in revenue shortfall. This is mostly due to sales tax. And it's important to note that the state was actually too conservative in their projection originally with what they would end up having a revenue loss. It ended up being more than predicted. And I know August 14th, the state economists are going to reconvene to drop new revenue forecasts. Now, there is a silver lining. So the state has $6 billion in reserves. And with the CARES Act from the federal government, this year we're not going to be impacted as much. And that's why you can see the budget reflected that. I think next year you're going to see the legislature is going to have to come up with more cuts. And I think it's going to be a very pared down budget. But right now, because of the state's reserves, we're doing well. I'd like to provide just a brief federal update because there's some exciting things happening on the federal end. So the Water Resources Development Act, which is WRDA 2020, had some movement. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee approved the 2020 Water Resources and Development Act. So that will be moving forward. And I know Congressman Mast had many amendments specifically related to our toxic algae discharges on that, or toxic discharges. And then the Energy and Water Appropriations House Committee came up with a report, and that final committee report included $250 million for South Florida ecosystem restoration. That's directly out of the president's budget. And then of that, Indian River Lagoon South is appropriated $150 million. Now this is just the beginning. There's a lot of movement that needs to happen on these two fronts. But this is a really great sign. And it's also interesting to see how Congress is convening. They're doing Zoom. I know Congressman Mast is showing up in person. And they're making progress. And so there's still a lot of committee stops and places to go, but there is energy and there is movement on these two important pieces. And then finally, I would like to end with a recommended action. So I recommend that the board authorize staff to prepare letters of support for the chair to sign when deemed appropriate. On the state front, we're going to be working directly with the water management districts and DEP in order to get funding for our biggest priorities. And then on the federal front, there's going to be a lot of movement and progress. And so I'd like for us to be able to write letters of support and then request support from our delegation and the different agency heads as these processes unfold. And so that's my presentation. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, during the lunch break, I read someplace electronically that the Water Management District and the Corps are already rebudgeting the $250 million. Did you get the same correspondence?
I didn't see that, so that might be a new update.
Okay. It didn't look favorable to us.
It did not?
It did not.
Well, I will update you all once I've read into that.
Obviously, as you said, there are a whole lot of stops that it has to go through before the Corps and the district can start negotiating. First of all, it has to be approved by Congress, by the Senate, by the President, and then they can start negotiating.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, a couple things. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chloe, thank you. Yesterday I talked with Chloe and Don Donaldson because we had a water policy environmental Zoom meeting yesterday with FAC with their board. And it got me thinking about, what would we be asking for this year and what things do we need modified, fixed, changed, whatever. And so I sort of challenged Chloe and Dawn to start thinking about Hope Heights, and if that were to repeat itself, if we were to ever have the condition that we're dealing with down there currently, what in state law is hindering us, challenging us, pushing us in the opposite direction from where we'd like to go to make things happen faster, sooner, quicker? And so I asked them to start thinking about that, because we have to get our recommendations into fact very soon relative to policy, the way we've kind of restructured how we're adopting policy language at fact. But I think there's probably more than not a good opportunity to start addressing some of those just functionality things of how does that process work. Also too, Chloe, maybe you could give us 2 seconds update if you know anything on Coral and the reauthorization, where we are with that. It's, we've had a couple Zoom meetings, we've had a couple call-in conferences that we've done up in Washington over the last probably 4 or 5 months. We're still thinking about how we can get there personally to go visit with people, and I guess that's not happening just yet still, but can you give us a little update on where we are with that?
So on the federal front, many things move really slow. So when it comes to the reauthorization of the Coral Reef Act, it's been a little bit of a struggle. We've had a couple more people sign on, but it doesn't have the same momentum. However, at the state level, I believe we requested $8 or $9 million, and I believe the state appropriated over $11 million specifically to coral efforts, and that's both through the Department of Environmental Protection, and then it's grants to any kind of private or nonprofit NGO that's working on the coral reef issue. So this state has really stepped up to the plate in regards to coral restoration and research into what are the contributing factors into the disease.
There may also be, I know that we have talked to some supporters of Kristen Jacobs and her efforts relative to our coral reef program and other things that she championed for us. So there'll probably be something that we will be bringing forward soon relative to language that would speak to naming our coral reef track, perhaps after her in some shape, form, or fashion. Haven't quite seen exactly what the detail on that is. Maybe Chloe has an update on that. Additionally, there's a working group. There are a handful of us that get together on Zoom or on whatever conference call and talk about coral. And there is some structural language that we will probably be putting forward here very shortly to figure out exactly when those funds are allocated at the state level, and even when there's pass-through funds from the feds to the state for the coral reef program, there may be some nuanced language that we need to put forward that will help streamline those dollars to DEP and put them in the right bucket with DEP that will allow DEP to spend those dollars where, how, and in the right sort of direction that we need to spend that in. So I fully expect that we'll have something coming forward on that as well this year. And then I don't know, Chloe, if there's, on the septic to sewer world and on the biosolids world, if there's any more that we need to follow on from what was approved this year to next year. But I suspect there'll be some additional work we'll want to probably do on that as well to keep that momentum going and keep that energy behind what the governor and the legislature has given us in terms of this far as where we are. So hopefully that will be happening very quickly, because we'll need to get those priorities to FAC to make sure that we can push those to the top of their agenda. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe.
Excellent job.
Were you looking for a motion?
Yes,
You wanted-
please.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I would move approval of the
Just staff recommendation would be
staff
great.
recommendation with also I'm sure it's part of the staff recommendation, but giving Chloe the authorization to sign letters on our behalf on those issues.
Chair?
Not to sign it, right.
Right, sorry. Yeah, Chloe, you can sign them. To present them on our behalf and have them signed by the chair when appropriate.
Second.
Okay. George, you have something to add to this, or you're just cleaning microphones? Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Now, we're to our last item. Department 7, request for authorization of the county administrator to execute memorandums of agreement, MOUs, for distribution of CARES Act funds and approval of personal assistance and emergency food relief MOU between Martin County and the United Way of Martin County. Mr. Stokes.
Mr. Chair, George Stokes, Assistant County Administrator. I was trying to get the longest title of the quarter award at that title. Apologize for
succeeded.
being so long. I did have assistance from legal on the title, by the way. We're here before you for basically two reasons, Mr. Chair. The first one is to affirm or reaffirm the ability for the county administrator to execute agreements between municipalities, which would be all the villages and the towns, constitutional officers, and other entities as it relates to the CARES Act funding. We're doing that for a couple reasons. One is so that we have a specific board item that directs and highlights that from the, well, we will be audited by the federal government and the state government for the CARES Act. The second thing before you, which is probably a little bit, which we want to go into a little bit more in depth, is the memorandum of agreements as it relates to the United Way for two services under the CARES Act. The first one being the personal assistance MOU, memorandum of understanding, excuse me. This is to provide social services to individuals who were impacted by COVID-19. This agreement would go from, would be retroactive from March 1st till December 30th of 2020. It allows us to engage into the existing system created by United Way, who I believe is partnering with the Salvation Army, as well as the House of Hope, to deliver assistance grants to Martin County. To go through and just go through the application process, it's any individual that's been affected by COVID-19 that is 300% above the federal poverty line and lower. For a family of four, that's approximately $78,000. So if you're in a family of four and one of the individuals loses their job and their income is, say, $50,000, they would qualify for a grant up to about $5,000 for personal assistance. The uses of that money would be for rent, mortgage assistance, and some utilities and so forth. The vetting will be done by the not-for-profit entities. They have an application process. The United Way will then batch all those applications. That batch will then be sent to our office. Our office will analyze it for eligibility. We will then disperse a check, go to the clerk. The clerk will then write a check to United Way. Those monies will be sent directly to the banks or the landlords, and then we will have a kind of a, it's not an audit process, but we will, I guess, self-audit to make sure that those payments are going to the correct individuals so that we will pass a single audit, which will come from the federal government. For that service, just to lay out what the fees are, the services will be approximately $1.7 million. We did negotiate a 10% administrative fee. There's quite a bit of legwork and office work that goes with that. In addition, we did in order to get the word out, we came up and authorized a $50,000 marketing plan, which will hit all aspects of media, from billboard to radio, television, and social media, bringing the total of that program to $1.975 million. The next MOU has to do with emergency food relief, and that, I called it personal food assistance. That what we're utilizing the United Way of Martin County, and that will allow all of the food pantries and agencies that have food in their mission to basically restock food in the pantries, as well as keep up with the current demand for food assistance as it relates to COVID-19. The MOU does go into state that we will not be doing what's kind of known as large food dumps. We did experience that in the early part of this year, where we had an entity just do a very large food gathering. It was kind of unorganized, and we are requiring that in order to get food, they have to prove that they're a Martin County citizen, as well as there is a component in there that deals with nutrition and farm fresh produce. Now, unfortunately, because of the time of year, we can't get farm fresh produce from Indiantown or Martin County. United Way has indicated that they will begin that process in talking to farmers in October, when the crops will be coming. I guess it's cool enough to grow crops. I'm not a farmer, although I would like to be one day, possibly. However, I did talk to a couple of different entities, and we could buy produce from some local distributors to get that nutrition component in. So it's not like I would like it to be just Cheetos and cookies. It's going to actually be fruits and veggies and so forth. When you read the CARES Act, it's my initial understanding that the CARES Act really wants to stock pantries. They really want, their needs, if you're going to buy hard goods. So the process that we're going through with this is the United Way has to buy the food. And the reason we're doing that is because it will protect the other entities from having to be obligated to opening up their records for a single audit, as I understand it. So if there were 5 different entities that wanted to buy food, they would present their programs to United Way. United Way would vet that for eligibility under their understanding of the CARES Act. That request would then be routed to administration. Administration would review it, as well as OMB. Once we approve it, that will go to the clerk's office. The clerk will remit a check. United Way will buy that food by the truckload. Someone from OMB or my office will go out and make sure that that thing has actually arrived, and that we'll follow it so that we can follow our audit process, so that that process will close the loop, hopefully. The cost for that service is about $3.2 million with a up to, and by the way, on both of these programs, those are up to numbers. So if United Way is not able to distribute 1.75 million for personal assistance, say only $1 million, they would only get 10% of $1 million. Same with the food service relief, we negotiated 9%, so they would have to distribute approximately 3.2 million for 9%, bringing your total program to 3,499,900, and I have a feeling we'll probably round that up to 3.5 million at some point. And that, Mr. Chair, staff is recommending the two items. Number one, that you authorize our county administrator to reaffirm it to sign MOAs, and we're asking that the board move on these MOAs for personal assistance and food assistance. And I am myself or Ms. Elder are here to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
Commissioner Campy.
Mr. Stokas, thank you very much. In the food distribution that the United Way is going to be doing, is any legitimate food not-for-profit, food distributor not-for-profit entitled to participate in that program?
Absolutely.
So it's not going to be like a small channel of
No.
folks?
And that's
You're
why
a
we
legitimate
chose.
food distributor.
Yeah.
You could participate.
And that is exactly why we chose the United Way, is we didn't want to limit the channel. You can be anything from the Catholic Church to Elevate Hope to even if the Boys and Girls Club wanted to, say, adjust their mission, I don't want to say change, but adjust it to meet the timeliness, they would provide a program to the United Way. The United Way will vet that, and we'll go through the eligibility, and we will try to meet those needs and demands. The CARES Act does say, we're working with the comptroller, we have a question, because there is some notation that ready food, so if you already have an existing food line and you've been doing that, the CARES Act doesn't necessarily pay for food to pay for that food line, but it will pay for food to fill a pantry. So perhaps when the food lines are emptying food that comes close to expiration, I think that's where there's a balance. But those are some things that we're going to have to work very closely with the clerk's office, who has been nothing but short of amazing in working with me. And I think we can find ways around a lot of these questions and get some good answers for that.
Thank you. This is a complicated process, but I like the way you've been navigating it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Hurd.
Yes, for both the personal assistance MOU and the emergency food relief MOU, the administrative fee is Martin County's and United Way's, or both?
The administration fee is United Way's.
What's ours?
I'm sorry, what was?
What's our administrative fees? We're going to have administrative fees also. If we're going to do self-audits, if we're going to be processing, if we're going to be
Yes.
making the applications, we're going to have administrative fees also, and we need to make sure that that the lion's share of the money goes to those in need.
Absolutely. And so as far as the cost for the audits, that is covered by the CARES Act. Ms. Elder and Ms. Woods and I are in what we like to call a lively discussion about my fee as my salary. Because I'm with you, Commissioner Hurd.
We
I
have
think the
to
CARES
pay
Act
you
pay
for doing your job. And if a huge part of your job is doing this, then yeah, we have to figure out what that administrative fee
I
is.
absolutely agree with you. We need to have further conversation with the state and with the federal level, because technically in CARES, there is some language that says, if I'm a budgeted item, which my wife calls me all the time, by the way.
If it's an expense that's, Elise Elder, Senior Assistant County Attorney for the record, if there's an expense already in your budget that you're already paying for, it's not covered under the CARES Act. It's for additional expenses. So for example, if George was working overtime and received overtime, potentially the overtime would be covered, not necessarily his base salary, but we're looking into that. So that's kind of
But I think your
restriction there.
sentiment, Commissioner, is that the first and foremost of my mind is how do we make sure that the county remains whole and solvent? And we are taking as many steps to be as legal and creative as possible without almost call her Commissioner Woods, without Sarah Woods or her staff really throwing anything at me. But we're throwing a lot of stuff out there, so I understand exactly where you're coming from with this. In a figurative sense. No.
And also, Mr. Stokas, this is, you've gotten all this tossed into your lap. I'm sure it's really complicated. It's uncharted, and you've turned this around so fast. You've been so responsive, and I'm very appreciative, and not nearly as appreciative as those who will be the recipients of the CARES Act.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I would be remiss without saying that there is literally hundreds of people behind me in the county that have helped me to do this, to bring this to you. And I love that I get the light here, but I know Elise Elder has put in hundreds of hours, and all those folks at admin who I couldn't name all of them, but I do appreciate it. And I am also happy to say that we are moving forward with the small business program. Mr. Hudson's on board with that. We will be coming out with further. You'll see more media and press on that coming later this week. And we will open that program on August 3rd, which you have already approved. But thank you very much.
Great job, all.
So do you have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Campy, seconded by Commissioner Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are at the end of our meeting here, so I have no public comment cards. Oh, Ms. Christo.
Yeah, I know, just before you get done, I wanted, in my conversations with the commissioners throughout this past week, essentially, next week, the Friday, August 7th, there's a couple commissioners that possibly won't be here. And I think now that we're pushing the data out that normally you would receive at your special meetings on those Fridays, I'm just wondering if there's a reason that we should meet. If I need to call an emergency meeting, I always feel in communicating with you that we can do that, but just to get together to...
I completely agree with you. Anybody?
Except that, are we going to have a meeting before August 9th?
No.
Because our executive order or ordinance is set to sunset on August 9th, and that would be a terrible mistake to allow that to expire.
Well, you can't continue it at this point.
So it's just going to expire without us having another meeting?
You can't continue it.
Can we do another one?
Sarah Woods, County Attorney, it expires by its own definition. You can't, it's not possible to, you would, at this point, in order to do another one, you would need to advertise just in the regular course of an ordinance, because it would no longer be an emergency ordinance. It's no longer an emergency. We were aware of the date it expired was specified in the ordinance.
Well, I'm absolutely adamant that we would not allow it to expire, or rather that if we need to have another advertise another meeting in order to create a new one, then by all means do it, because it's clear that it's beneficial. And to let it expire and to not craft another ordinance would be reckless and destructive.
We don't, Commissioner Hurd, we don't have the time frame to continue it, so it's going to have to expire. If the board gives us direction that they want to have it come back, then we would want to do that. But quite frankly, some of the feedback that I've been getting is that the individuals that believe it was beneficial will continue to wear their masks, even if we don't have it as a mandate. And so that's kind of the feedback I've been getting.
I'm going to make a motion to craft a new ordinance, and that it be brought back to us at the very next meeting.
Well, I think that the moments of discussion for an issue like this would require more than that. I think maybe what we need to do then is, if it needs to be advertised in order to even have the conversation of the ordinance, I think the direction should be to staff to advertise it. I don't know if, with all due respect to Commissioner Hurd, her comments right now, seconded and voted, is the whole dialogue on whether or not we're going to extend the mandate or craft a new version of it, and then have the full participation, which I would assume it will require, versus us just doing it right this moment like this. I also think that considering the fact that we're in litigation, I'd want to make sure that we're not knee-jerk reacting to an extension or anything like that. I'm not an attorney, but with that in mind, I know that we are under current litigation, that I would want to make sure that at least if to Commissioner Hurd's point, the process in my mind should be we set up what's necessary to have a more full conversation on what's happening. Let's hear from our medical professionals. Let's see if we can have some information in terms of how we feel the mandate has been working. I look at the numbers like everybody else does each day. I think they look very encouraging. I'm not disagreeing with what Commissioner Hurd is saying, but I think for a motion to extend, seconded, and voted on is not in my mind, the proper procedure. So not seconding her motion doesn't mean that I'm not in favor of the conversation to see where we stand, but to just throw it out against the wall and see what happens, I'm not prepared to do that today. I also think that we would, although the process of public comment can sometimes be challenging, it's still a legitimate process that needs to take place.
So I want to bring something up that I just got an opinion on whether I should bring up, that I was talking to somebody we all know and love dearly, Miss Vicki Davis. She's very uncomfortable with a situation of having the primaries in a public building and having to either enforce mandatory mask ordinance or not enforce it. She's uncomfortable with the idea of somebody accusing her of suppressing votes or suppressing voters. This ordinance does expire just prior to that. I don't think this conversation needs to happen until after that. This is a no-win deal in her situation.
It certainly is if people aren't wearing masks.
Well, I realize that, but at the same time, businesses are now, most businesses are requiring it. Most people, even the ones that gave me hell when we did this, I pass in Publix wearing a mask now. I don't know what's changed their mind. And I'll go so far to say that any public, or any place that I go, and not that I go to a lot of places, but there's 95%. I mean, I went to Publix the other day, I counted about 47 people in the store and one person wasn't wearing a mask. You know, I wouldn't want to be that one person walking around the store without a mask. So I think just that feeling that those people have been, they're donning a mask. And so I just really, I think that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing now. Our numbers are reflecting it. And I'm uncomfortable with putting our supervisor of elections into a situation she's going to get sued either way. So that's just my take on it.
I would concur with your comments.
So this conversation needs to happen after that, if. So we have a motion that does not have a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because I think this is probably one of the most important conversations we've had the whole day. Ms. Krista, the mandate is supposed to expire on which date?
August the 8th,
The 8th, and which is a
Saturday.
And we are meeting on Tuesday, the 11th,
The
correct?
11th, yes, sir.
So even if the mandate were to expire on the 8th, we're meeting 2 days later. So what we're basically talking about is a 48-hour lapse in the mandate. I think that the other thing that we need to take into
Sarah has something to say about that.
I understand that we can't just automatically bring it back
Yeah,
on
okay.
the 11th, but there has to be, this is such a contentious issue. I think all of us can agree the fact that it has really seriously divided our community and fractured us in a way that I have never seen before. People that are reasonable-minded people have really staked out a claim on one side or the other of this issue. Now, we can debate the percentages of how many are on one side versus the other, but it has been really a very difficult time for us as a community. I would have hoped that, you know, from the federal government to the state government to the local government, it would have been a more smooth process, but it hasn't been. So with that in mind, I just want to be cautious. I'm not opposed to what Commissioner Hurd is saying, and I have, you know, every day I look to see that number to see, you know, how is it working. I agree. Commissioner Jenkins, I have seen a tremendous amount of people wearing the mask, and I think one of the common misconceptions of our original order was the fact that we were looking for 100% compliance. I believe our number was approximately 60% voluntary compliance, and I think that the mandate, sort of the ordinance, did give businesses an opportunity to feel safe that they were only enforcing a mandate. Just like we wanted to hear it from up above, business owners and private business owners wanted to hear it from us, and they did. So I think that there was probably a percentage of maybe 10 to 15% of the population that said, okay, now that it is an ordinance and mandated, I will wear the mask. I think businesses that felt leery about getting into, you know, arguments with their customers felt that they had protection by virtue of the fact that the county had passed this ordinance. There were some folks that had medical, and we had a long list of exemptions that a lot of people still weren't familiar with. You know, a lot of people on social media were saying, well, that's terrific. Now I'm going to be out walking my dog and I'm going to have to wear a mask. No, there were a lot of exemptions that covered some of these things. And then, of course, if you had medical or psychological reasons that you couldn't wear the mask, we weren't coming after them. I would like to hear from sheriff's personnel on what interactions they've had and what level of pushback did they get? How often were they called? I've had lots of conversations with sheriff's office personnel, but I didn't get into the actual details of, have they been out there? The sheriff is on television saying that his vision was much more of an educational advisory role than a punitive role. Well, I'd like to hear from him and see if they got people that were trying to make a stand. I did hear from sheriff's deputies that if that were the case, then it's no longer the mask mandate rule that people were breaking. It was trespassing after being warned that they weren't welcomed on people's private property, even if that's a business. Or the fact that if someone was going to make a big scene, that goes again beyond the wearing of a mask and it becomes disorderly conduct. So I don't know if he's written warnings. I'd like to know that. And then I'd also like to hear from our medical professionals again to find out what they're hearing. I know that St. Lucie County today decriminalized their order that they had that their administrator passed on his own, and they've switched it to an ordinance. I'd like to know, this is such an important issue, I'd like to know exactly where we stand so that we can present information effectively, because this is one of the most challenging issues that Martin County residents, I believe, have faced potentially ever.
Well, another thing that's changed that I think is encouraging people to do it is our national politics. The president is walking around with a mask and encouraging people to make masks. So, you know, it's kind of taken away that argument that was so loud, about. So I see everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing. I see the people that will wear a mask. The 5 or 10%, I don't care if we made it a felony, they're not going to wear a mask, just to make a statement. So I believe that we've accomplished the goals that we've set out to do. And I just want to reiterate, there is no way I would support anything that's going to put put Vicki in a situation. So with that, where are we? Oh, go
I
ahead.
just want to share a positive, because Commissioner Campy was asking for information. We did go through with the community policing department and our NAC members in Golden Gate, and we distributed about 1,000 masks on a weeknight when folks were coming home from work, and it had very, very positive reception. The residents were almost thankful to have received it. We facilitated some mask distribution in Central Stewart. So I think some of those positive, proactive measures are a good thing that we continue to do.
Now, the food worker thing, or how does that work? Does that revert back to what it used to be?
No,
Or
because
we do need to-
Separate.
No, it was repealed when we
Right.
passed the
It was a
ordinance.
separate one.
Yeah, it was a separate emergency order, and when you passed the emergency ordinance, then that overrode the emergency order specifically.
So we have no protections as of August 8th.
Commissioner Smith?
While we're on the subject, I don't know if you've all had communication with, I guess the big one is the air show, but the second tier down from that, I guess if you will, the seasonal art shows, outdoor events that we're going to have, or won't have, or will have, or whatever this season. We have got to get, I think, a more formalized read from the governor as to how that's going to play out, and how that's going to happen. You know, we all talk about our nonprofits and the importance of them all, and to a large extent, a lot of them have both fundraising events, dinner events, lunch events that are part of their fundraising strategy for the year. But they also get involved with sponsoring outdoor art shows. Hope Sound has one, Jensen has a couple, Stewart certainly has a couple. And then, of course, the air show, will have thousands of people, and we have got to get some kind of direction as to how this is all going to unfold, for people. My sense is if wearing a mask is safe or safer, and people are doing that, and that's going to be the requirement to have these events, then so be it. And we need to think about that and address it, because that time for commitment for sponsorships and for people lining up what they're hoping to do for the season is quickly coming on them, on us, if you will. So I know that's not really in our hands, and the governor's orders are where they are currently under phase 2, I guess we're in still.
We are, yes.
But man, oh man, I just, we had a rough enough winter, end of the winter for the nonprofits that had their events scheduled, March and April and May. Heading back into the season, we will have significant events starting in October, if they're to happen. And I guess we really need to get a handle on understanding what that's going to look like for them and for us in terms of how we're going to interpret that. Because the crazy thing, if you think about it, and I've had this conversation with Ms. Woods and Taryn, and on any given weekend, you can go to downtown Stewart, and there may be a couple hundred people milling around in downtown Stewart. Because there's no event, you can be milling around in downtown Stewart. But if you have an event where you have a couple hundred people, you can't have it. And so, I think there needs to be at least some recognition that we understand what that looks like. I mean, on any given weekend, we may have 1,000 people at the beach. Now, granted, they're not all on top of each other, and generally speaking, people don't do that, but we still have hundreds of people at the beach. But if you have an organized event that is going to be an art show, right now it doesn't look like anything over 50 people you could do that. And so I just think we need to keep pushing the governor's office or keep pushing somebody in Tallahassee to move us in the direction that either allows them to happen or makes it black and white they're not going to happen, so that everybody can start planning accordingly financially how they're going to deal with their nonprofits through this coming year.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just was going to add that I'd had that conversation with Commissioner Smith, and our office was going to try to reach out to some other jurisdictions. I know I heard on the radio just the other day that the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show was planning on going forward, and they were enumerating what they thought were the proper guidelines to hold that kind of event. So I suspect, I agree with you, Commissioner Smith, we need to look to Tallahassee for guidance as well, but also try to reach out to some other jurisdictions to see if there were any policies or parameters that they were using to effectuate the CDC recommendations.
Okay. So, yes, sir.
Just to work on some clarification based on some of the information that we heard, Ms. Woods, in order to even have a conversation on a potential ordinance, you would have to advertise how many days before the event?
We need 10 days.
Okay, so the 11th of August, based on my quick count on my calendar, is 13 days from now.
Yeah,
So even if we were going to have a conversation on a continuation of the mask mandate on the 11th, you'd have to potentially advertise it. Now, advertising an ordinance doesn't mean that we would do it or that it would pass. In order to even have the conversation, you would have to advertise it, correct? And if you don't advertise it, we cannot have the conversation on the 11th.
you can have the conversation, but you can't vote on it.
And then if we decided after the conversation on the 11th, look, hopefully the numbers continue to stay, straight and flat, or even, God willing, decline. But if 10 days from now, look, every day is a new day in this situation. If in the future, if we got to the 11th and decided, it's obvious we probably might have to do this again, we couldn't do anything, then you'd have to wait an additional 10 days, correct?
Yes, but it's not, and I want to get into the weeds here, but the 10-day requirement is being, the day it's published, these days, and not to knock the Stewart News, but getting something into the paper sometimes is a challenge. So how quickly we can get the Stewart News to put something into their queue, but you're right. In general, yes.
Also, I'd like to offer, Commissioner Jenkins, you won't be here on the 11th, but you were going to zoom in, so that means Commissioner Heatherington will be chairing that meeting.
I'm just trying to keep our options open to us so that based on what the next up to 2 weeks looks like, we'd have more flexibility versus having our hands tied behind our back. The other thing to take into consideration is that we are not the first community to have initiated this or seen the expiration of it. So is there any way you can give us some information and feedback on what some other counties, I know that there's a difference between a charter and a constitutional county. I always hear a lot of people saying, well, Palm Beach County just did this, and I know that they just extended theirs, but they're a charter county, correct?
They are a charter county, but they have implemented their face covering requirement through an emergency order. It has the accompanying criminal penalties, although they used emergency orders, which are signed by their county commissioner, county administrator, excuse me.
And the sheriff has indicated that he's willing to write those citations.
Right. So
Can we find out from our friends in Palm Beach County, or even St. Lucie County has had their emergency order? I know they changed it today, but they had their emergency order in place for approximately 2 to 3 weeks now. Can we find out, just some actual real-world data on what the interaction between the citizens and law enforcement has been? I feel like we could make, I'll speak for myself, I could make an emotional decision based on what's been happening, but I don't want to do that. I'd like to have as much information available to me. I'm sure my colleagues would as well. I don't want to look like we're being, as Commissioner Hurd indicated, like we're somehow being careless or destructive, which I don't believe any of us are, that's our intention. But on the other hand, if there's an ability that I personally would like to see some healing in the community, and if there's a way that we can achieve our goals of getting the highest percentage of people conforming to this issue with the masks. I know that there is so much information, valid and not valid, that is going around on, everyone's an expert because they've seen a YouTube video, and, it's been quiet through our medical professionals. I haven't heard a lot from them like we had been up to now. I'd like to know what their opinions are. Like, what do they think about the trends? We've done an excellent job of altering our daily dashboard, putting out information the way people had wanted to see it. Some of the positivity percentages are different. Where are we? I don't believe we're in the same urgent state we were 3 weeks ago, but I don't think we're by any stretch out of the woods. I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel, but I don't want to say that I'll just throw the mandate away because we don't need it anymore, because there's so many moving parts to this. But on the other hand, if we need it, then I want to at least have the ability to have a conversation and do something about it, not have to wait an additional 2 weeks. Even though I'm not opposed to a test to see if it stayed in place and the businesses felt comfortable keeping the policies in place, even if it wasn't a mandate, if we could get to policy, and where people felt now after wearing the masks for a month, yeah, I'll keep doing it. I also see the numbers are down, I'll keep wearing the mask. Maybe we don't need to have the mandate anymore, but if we do, I'd want to have the option to institute it.
Well, I was going to offer, one thing we could do is, if you wanted to do something, is we could do, like we started this out initially, with an emergency order that strongly encourages wearing the masks, because we can state in there that we believe that the masks have helped our situation, and we could do that like we had done before. And we could include food service in that if you so chose. But then we'd be doing something if you just...
And again, if it's strongly encouraged, even though it's under an emergency order, you're not invoking the penalty
Right.
phase of it.
Right, because it's encouraged.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that, and I think that it, at the very least, should potentially ease some of Commissioner Hurd's concern that on the 8th it disappears. I would make a motion that we, on the 8th, institute an emergency order that would strongly encourage Martin County residents or, people that are in Martin County to wear their masks in the same policies and criteria that we currently have, and that the same language that we had for food service people, remember the original one that sunsetted? Can we bring that language back?
You can, but that's mandatory.
And can we-
You just want to do it strongly encouraged?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, at the very least, we're just going a couple of days. It gives us some coverage. The all or nothing policy is not ideal. If on the 8th, if we don't do anything right this minute, on the 8th, it's over. So I would rather have something in place that keeps that momentum going, even if it's not quote-unquote mandatory anymore, even if it doesn't have the penalties. Hopefully, we have encouraged and educated and gotten our citizens to understand the value. Like Commissioner Jenkins said, the president is now speaking about the benefits of masks. There are some people that will never see the benefit of a mask and will never participate in the mask wearing, whether it's they have a legitimate reason not to or they just have a belief that they don't want to. We're not going to be able to address those folks, but if we can get a percentage high enough and our numbers continue to stay steady like they have been, I think it's a step in the right direction. Mary Kay, that's a lot of commentary, but do you got the gist of my motion? It gives us some ability to do something. And I think even the folks, my final comment, even the folks that were very opposed to the mandate, a lot of them were understanding of the benefit of the mask. I've heard from plenty of people, I'm not opposed to the mask, I just don't like the mandate. So then this can give them an opportunity to prove it.
Right.
Thank you.
Second.
Any other comment before we vote?
Strongly encouraged.
I would like to,
Should
I
there
mean, if
be-
we're going to vote on it, I would actually like to have to see it and read it again, and I don't even remember, that was 2 ordinances ago.
With an emergency order, Commissioner.
Order.
Is signed by
I mean,
the
it sounds
county
like your
administrator.
motion and your second is to vote on that, and I don't even have that in front of me, nor have I looked at that in
I think
many, many days.
Yeah, procedurally, with an emergency order, it's signed by the county administrator.
I think her point is that she,
Yes,
what I'm
I
trying
understand that.
to clarify, what I'm saying here is that our mandated ordinance, the language of that, the exemptions of that, and where it was, where you needed to do it and not do it, basically what's currently happening today in an emergency ordinance, all of the language would stay the same, except it's no longer a mandate, it's now strongly encouraged. So all of the language of what's currently in place is the same, except it's no longer mandated, it's strongly encouraged.
Instead of shall, it's strongly
But I
encouraged.
thought you wanted to go back to the former ordinance that said that there were certain functions, like food service workers, were mandated, and
We changed.
It would fall into that same thing.
so it's all strongly encouraged, is
Yes,
what you're
ma'am.
saying?
Yeah.
Commissioner Spath.
So this will come back on the 8th,
No.
9th?
No,
No.
a emergency order is signed by the county administrator and goes into effect when she signs it. Now, the nice thing about an emergency order is it can be rescinded immediately. It's, it doesn't have the force of an ordinance. So should the board give the county administrator on the 11th the direction to rescind that emergency order, I'm certain she would comply since we answer to you.
So the message needs to be is that we need to all do the right thing, because that could very easily change into an ultra mandatory thing overnight if we
Yes.
start going in the wrong direction. So can that be part of the,
Well, that could
do
be
the
part-
right thing or else?
That could be part of the education, obviously. We'll want to do a press release, push it out, and we can put that in part of that communication and make sure that, people understand why this is being done, that it's been a positive trend, if you will, and that we just would like for people to keep doing the right thing. Exactly.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Campy.
One more.
Seconded, what?
Again, I just want to clarify, because sometimes when we have these conversations and the following week, there was a misinterpretation. So we are not going back to the former order. We are changing the emergency ordinance.
No, ma'am.
He said emergency ordinance. It's actually an emergency order.
We're crafting a brand-new
No, we're
emergency
currently in an
order.
emergency ordinance.
Order.
Right.
It looks like a resolution type of thing, an emergency order that the county administrator signs. And it would be unlike anything that we have had before, in the sense that it strongly encourages masks, but by the motion maker's direction, it would track the current requirements and on all, but instead of it saying shall, it would be strongly encouraged. So it would be very similar to the emergency ordinance, but it would no longer be mandatory. It would just be strongly recommended. There would be no penalties attached to the,
Could
it
we
would be a,
bring that back on the 11th so we can actually see it?
Because then it'll expire.
It would have expired by then.
no,
10.
oh, the ordinance will have been expired. Certainly, though, to answer your question, Commissioner Heatherington, on the 11th, should you have seen it and you were unhappy with it, that could be a discussion on the 11th.
But as soon as we get it drafted, we can shoot a copy out to each commissioner so that they have a chance to review it and look at it, and then that way it'll go, you reach out to me and let me know where your concerns are, and Ms. Woods, and
Well, I think we're missing something here. Just to be clear, it's the exact same thing that we're doing currently, the exemptions and where you were required to wear it and what the exemptions were, so that we're not having to re-educate and re-inform all of our public. The FAQs stay the same, everything stays the same. It goes from being mandatory to being strongly recommended. We'd still be, out there educating, trying to get people to do the right thing. Hopefully now, after a month of this, that was the goal of the ordinance in the first place, was to sort of muscle memory people into having the mask in the car. The stores that were handing them out still do that. Several of the businesses that I've been to, I said, how's the mask thing going? They said, good. Some people have come in, they didn't have masks. We've had masks, they put them on, or they said they had a medical reason. I don't think it turned into the hell on earth that people were fearful that it would. And if anything, by going strongly away from shall, maybe a lot of the folks that were angry that we were quote-unquote overreaching will just wear the masks knowing that we're not overreaching. And the folks that were pro-masks in the medical community and all those other folks, we're still going to have that level of people participating, because I think everyone is starting to understand. There was a lot of people that said, well, the masks are useless or they suffocate me, but even the President of the United States now has started to change his sort of messaging to the fact that masks are helpful. I think we're right there.
Okay. We have a motion.
I'm not opposed to strongly encourage, there is some language in that ordinance, like that section I, that I would assume would no longer be applicable, that businesses shall accommodate, because if you're strongly encouraging, then those provisions would be stricken, probably.
Only unless someone still wanted to take up the options that business, that I gave. If you didn't want to wear the mask, even if we were strongly encouraging it, that the store would offer you some accommodations, delivery, pick it up at the curb, whatever. I don't think taking it out hurts anything. If anything, it leaves them an option.
It gets complicated because with or without that ordinance, any private business would always have the right to request somebody to leave their premises as long as it's not as long as it isn't for a discriminatory purpose. So we didn't require, that was just that section, that subsection I believe it was meant to provide to alert the businesses that they still had the ability to ask someone with an exemption to leave their store and to provide them an accommodation for the service that wouldn't endanger their employees.
Let's also understand, Ms. Woods is exactly right. Something's changed since the last time we had this conversation. Walmart, Target, Walgreens, CVS, and I'm sure a host of other nationwide retailers have created their own policies having nothing to do with Martin County. You cannot go into Walmart without a mask on, whether we had a policy or not. That's their internal corporate policy. So what we're discussing now has nothing to do with how nationwide chains have mandated their own issues. It has nothing to do with us. So there's still plenty of places you won't be able to go into, strongly encouraged or not, because at Walmart you have to have a mask on. That rule is their rule, not ours.
Now, can I?
I think so.
Okay. Let's try this one more time. We have a motion by Commissioner Campy, seconded by Commissioner Hurd. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
So no meeting on the
no
7th?
meetings unless it's an emergency meeting that we're
Right.
going to call, right?
Yes, sir.
So our next meeting is August 11th. I'll be on Zoom, and the 25th for our regular meetings, and August 20th, joint city school.
No, we took that off. Didn't we? It's October.
I hope so, because I would hate to have to Zoom twice.
I think it's in October.
Okay, because
I'll verify. Sorry, Donna.
that's my grandson's birthday.
If it is, we should cancel it.
Okay. All right, so with that, unless anybody has anything else, we are done.